Hey, this is Steve. I have a 2004 Cadillac SRX, and the traction control system was automatically engaging just on dry pavement for no particular reason, and it didn't give any code or anything along with it. I think many times this happens is because the steering wheel position sensor goes out, so I'm going to give that a shot and see if that fixes it. Sometimes you have codes with that, sometimes it didn't. This happened a few years ago, and I replaced the steering wheel position sensor and it fixed it. So I'm assuming it's probably the same thing again. Before you get started with this, you want to disconnect the battery, and usually I'll disconnect the negative side if I have equal access. That way if I happen to ground out the wrench on something, it doesn't spark like crazy. And also you don't want the steering wheel to the airbag to deploy. The other thing you want to make sure you do is tape the steering wheel, and let me show you what that looks like. So you can see here on the top of the steering wheel I ran some duct tape across the top, so that kind of stabilizes the steering. When you pull the steering column out, you don't want to spin the steering wheel around because there's electrical connections in there that'll get damaged if you do that. And the other thing I did before I unhooked the battery is I pulled the seat all the way back, so it gives you more room when you're working under the dash because it's kind of tight anyways. And another thing that I did in here is the steering wheel was a little cocked off the left or right, so I put the key in, lined up the steering wheel so it got it straight before I taped it. That way when it goes back together I know how it's supposed to look. And like I said, here's the negative side of the battery is unhooked, and that should prevent the airbag from going off, because you don't want that to happen either. That'd be a bad thing. Alright, this panel here underneath the steering column, there's a bolt up here behind the parking brake release. There's one bolt or screw here, and then there's two screws over here on the right. So you gotta take all four of those screws out to get this panel loose, and then it just kind of pops out. Alright, this piece that basically fits up underneath above the brake pedal, there's a screw here and there's a screw here that you take apart from the bottom. Then there's a light here, it has a safety clip. You gotta push the tab down and then it pops right out. And behind the plastic there's a piece of metal in there. Probably has to do with helping your knees not get smashed by stuff if you get in an accident. But anyways, this piece of metal needs to come out. There's two 10mm bolts, one here and then there's another one over here. Just take those out and that piece will come right down. Alright, we have to unhook the steering column from right above the steering gearbox, which is inside of the left front tire. Basically underneath here there's a cross member coming through right next to your left catalytic converter. There's your gearbox. It's kind of hard to see. Using a 13mm socket with a couple extensions, loosened it up. You kind of see up in there, there's the top of the gearbox, and then there's the column coming off of it. And then right up here you can get a 13mm socket. You can actually see it right now. But right up in there's the bolt. You just take that bolt off with a socket, and then you can be able to pull the steering column loose from inside the vehicle. Oh man, should have jacked it up a little bit more, I guess. Anyways, up in here, there's the bolt I took out, and it's in that shaft. You can see the hole there right above that. So now I pull the steering column out from inside the vehicle, it'll pull apart right there, and I'll be able to pull the whole thing right out. Keep in mind it's gonna be a trick to put that back together later. Oh man, it's gonna be like a circus act. Probably nice to have a couple people involved. Let's get my son out here to help. So inside the vehicle here, you can see the steering wheel position sensor is right up in here.
So we have to kind of drop this down and take this apart to get at it. This boot here is around the steering knuckle going down to the gearbox. I pulled this one back, but I can't really get in there good enough to get any bolts or anything. So there's 4 bolts, 2 there, 2 in the back. Pull them down. A couple electrical connectors here. Take them apart. So there's 2 bolts there, 2 bolts there, nuts rather. Take those off, and the whole thing will drop down. And should be able to just take it right out at that point. Well, I had a problem. I couldn't get the shaft apart underneath the car. I got the bolt out, but the shaft wouldn't release where it feeds into the gearbox. So what I did was I cut back the collar here. There's a rubber collar. I just cut this off, cut it in half, and pulled it out. So that way I can get at this bolt up in here, which actually is up on the other side. Oh, crap. That's going to be hard to get to. It's pointing up, not down. That's a bummer. Well, I'll have to maneuver that one, I guess. Shoot. I don't want to turn the steering wheel either to help get to it, because that's kind of locked in place where it is.
Okay, so I'm sliding the new one on. This pin here, leave that in place until you get this seated all in where it's supposed to go. I was looking inside there to see if there's any dirt or anything like that. There shouldn't be any. It looks pretty clean, just dusty. Might dust it off there a little bit, but other than that, it's all, done with magnetism. So I just want to make sure it's cleaned out in there pretty good. Careful to clean it with too. Just gonna use a dry cloth. But anyways, I'll show you how this thing comes apart, goes back together. There's 4 bolts there that come in from the bottom. I took this one bolt off the shaft, and that was a little tricky to get to because there's a rubber boot that covered it. I'll show you that in a minute too. Clean it, I'm just gonna blow it out with a little compressed air. So that just popped in there real nice. There's a pin kind of behind this that goes into a hole. Then you got these 2 retaining clips there that hold it in. And you want to make sure you put this clip back in so it'll stay true to the shaft. And I have this one little clip here. Gotta look and see how that thing went exactly. Alright. And that metal clip went down here on the bottom. So I'm ready to take this pin out. Just unscrew this, I guess. Pops right out. That's ready to be put in. So this is where the steering column attaches. And it's going to be a little bit of a trick to get this lined up as it slides in. I got to slide it into this first before I push it up into the bolts. Alright, well, set it up on in there. You can see there's a bolt up in here. Just got them loose, and one over on the other side up in here. That way you can maneuver this around and push these back up in and tighten those bolts. Need to drop this bolt in the top, and this has like a little retaining thing, so you drop it down in, then you can tighten it up. You don't have to hold it with a wrench on the top. That's kind of nice. Just make sure when you put this thing together that you don't turn the steering wheel so it's in the same position as when I took it apart. Didn't push the car around or anything. That's about it. I put this bolt back in. You can see the bolt I dropped in the top. I put the nut on loose, so I'm going to tighten that up here in a minute. Just want to say, don't drop it down in there. You could probably get it out fairly easy, I guess, with a magnet stick or something, but sometimes it's worth just taking your time so you don't screw things up.